Hi guys, happy Valentine's Day to all of you out there, and thank you for joining us on the tips and tricks for setting up your stock in cooking the books. So a lot of you obviously knowing that stock is the first thing that you need to get your database up and running, and obviously we're more than happy to get you started with your stock import. Want to know the best way to fill in this stock so that you can get the most usage out of the system. So I'll show you what it looks like when you're actually inside cooking the books. So stock maintenance is where we store all of the stock. The first thing that we need to know is obviously which supplier you buy that stock from. So that's how we know, who to order it from, where the invoices belong to. If you're doing an order based on recipes, obviously which ingredient comes from which supplier. And then you just, select whichever supplier and it will load that particular stock list. Now, this will have the supplier's code, the description, brand name, cost, amount, unit, packaging type, category, dietary requirements, wastage percentage, par level, whether or not there's GST, whether or not you want to include that in nutrition, if it's a reportable item, whether it's food related, and if it's a locked in price. So supplier's code, not all suppliers use them, but if they do, it's always a fantastic idea to use the actual supplier's code in this column. That way, when you place an order, they know exactly what product they're using. And also, if you're using our invoice ripper feature, it means that the system will automatically know that this 098479 code is the penne pasta, because this is exactly what the supplier sent through, which has got hashtags. Some of them, make no sense, like this one. It's not really like a human language, it's computer language. So you can call that whatever you want. A lot of people like to put something first, so they'll have like pasta-penne or herbs-coriander. So when they're doing an order, all the herbs are together, which is always a great idea to make it nice and organized. But you can obviously write this description as anything you would like, especially if there's a code. And you can write as much information in there as you feel is necessary for both yourself and your supplier to make sure you understand exactly what you're after. Brand names, if you do have a preference of which brand of penne that you have, great idea to put the brand name in here as well. That also gives you the ability to report on brand names, so you can see exactly how much you bought from particular brands. If you're big enough, that means you can go straight to the manufacturer and so exactly how much you've been purchasing of their product through their resellers. Now, the cost. So if you don't know the cost when you add a new item, it's not hugely important, because as soon as you get an invoice, you're going to update that. What is important, that this cost here for $2 marries up with this packaging type. So if you're buying a 5 kilo box, you don't want the cost per kilo, you want the cost of the whole box. Otherwise, when you go and do a recipe and cost that out, it's not going to make any sense whatsoever. Now, all the supplier sees is this packaging type. So you can either free type in here and call it whatever you want. There'll also be a drop down of all of your existing packaging types that you can reuse. And then the amounts and units, obviously the units are, grams, kilos, mils, things like that. So example here is obviously a 100-gram packet. You can have an each, so something that you are doing an individual piece of. Now, there are some things that get a little complex depending on what you use, like herbs. You can do roughly 100 grams per bunch and do your herbs per grams in your recipe. Or if you prefer to write quarter of a bunch of parsley in your recipe, do it as a 1 each bunch. Most of this obviously is going to be different for every single user depending on how you're going to use it. The one thing that we always recommend is this gluten-free pasta here, where you've got a 3 kilogram each. Is never a good idea, because the supplier is going to see that you've ordered 1 each. Do you want 1 bag? Do you want 1 box? Do you want 1 pallet? They don't know. And normally, especially with dry goods suppliers, that code is exactly the same for all the inner and outer measurements. So call it a box, call it a bag, call it a pallet, call it whatever it is that you're ordering, and make it as, dummy proof for not only your chefs that are placing the order, but also them for the suppliers who are trying to decipher what it is that you are actually trying to order. Now you can add units apart from the standard ones that come in either metric or imperial measurements in there, like your grams, tablespoons, cups, things like that. We generally recommend you don't do that, but if you do want to do a slice instead of calling it an each, please just, let us know and we'll make sure that we can help you set that up correctly rather than having things that don't quite convert the way that they should. Now, the category is used for some reports, but generally it's used for your stock taking. So the default category of the system is general. So if you add something new from an invoice, you do nothing with it, it's going to end up in general. You can then obviously recategorize this to whatever you want it to be. Now, you can just have dry goods, or you can separate your dry goods into oils, vinegars, spices, really get that into a very specific category there. That's completely up to you, how you're going to find it easiest to do your stock take, which reports are going to make the most sense as well. That sort of code description, cost, amount, unit, packaging type, and category is what we recommend people start off with the system having. Once you've got that, the system is going to work the way that you need it to in terms of placing orders and costing out your recipes, obviously, so long as that's all correct. What's extra once you're in the system is the ability to link things like a dietary requirement. So these are your allergens. So something like a balsamic vinegar where there's some odd allergens in there, you can definitely click in there that you do have those allergies. So when it goes into a recipe, it automatically ticks those dietary requirements in the recipe for you. You don't accidentally forget that the tomato sauce that you have is something that contains gluten, and then accidentally give it as a gluten-free option when you shouldn't have. Wastage percentage, anything that has a yield, you can use our yield testing, save in here what the wastage percentage of that product is. So with your, haggis as an example here, if you have a 10% wastage, so you need 1.1 kilos in order to get a full kilo of usable haggis, save in 10%, it means we cost out 10% more of that product when you write it into a recipe. Really, really important if you are butchering your own meat and seafood to use this. Otherwise, your recipe costs are going to be hugely inaccurate. If you are buying portion cut meat, not such an issue because obviously you should have zero wastage on that product. Now, your par levels, if you do want to set a par level, we do have the ability to do a low, medium, and high par level. So that means when you've done a stock take, you can reorder back up to your par level and choose whether you're going to need low, medium, or high levels of stock. So most people have that set up so that low is your, midweek days, in a low off-season type period, and medium will be your weekend on those days. When it gets to high season, you've got the medium for your midweek days and then high for the weekends, public holidays, things that you expect it to be much higher than normal. Obviously, you can just have one medium and use everything up to a set par level and change that as you feel the need to as well. It's just another option that you can use. Most people tend to do it for their dry goods and their frozen goods. Not so much getting used, obviously, for the fruit and veg side of things because you're going to have to do a stock take every day and people hate doing it once a month or once a week. And not many people obviously want to do it once a day. Now, GST, if you know there's GST on a product, tick this box. If you have absolutely no idea what is GST and isn't GST applicable, don't worry too much about it because every time that you get an invoice that has GST, we tick the box. If you've ticked the box and an invoice doesn't have GST, we untick the box because obviously products don't flip and flop between having and not having GST. They either do or don't forever. So that's just one little thing that we try and make easier because obviously chefs are not accountants and we don't expect them to know this. Whether or not you use it in nutrition, again, this will just show ticked if it's linked. You can link it in the recipe book or you can link it from here if you wanted to use nutrition in your recipes as well. Now, your report button, as you can see, everything here is showing as ticked. So if I untick this and I save, you'll notice that that top penne pasta has magically disappeared. Why that is because it's now in the non-report items. So that and anything else ticked as non-report is hidden from the system. So that means we're not currently using the penne pasta, but we probably will again. We're going to hide it from the system. It's not going to come up when we place our orders. It's not going to come up when we write our recipes. It's not going to come up when we do our stock take. But when we are ready to bring it back, all we have to do is hit the show non-report item and retick that box. Now, let's say you've forgotten that it was there. You forget that the hide and show non-report is a function that you can use. If you do, and you get an invoice for that particular code, we're automatically going to tick that box for you again, because obviously you will need to count it on your stock take if you have been invoiced for it. So we do try and make things as easy as possible for you. Even though sometimes cooking the books can seem like a complex system, we try and make sure that we make it as user-friendly as possible for the least mistakes as possible. Food related, as you can see, there are some things on this list that are highlighted as blue. What this means is that everything on this list is going to a default code, either overall your suppliers or set by supplier. These blue ones here are showing you that they do not belong to the same code as the rest of this supplier. When you integrate with your accounting system, we will then trigger you to select an account code for either all of the items or individually assign a GL code to these items. That means that you can go and place your orders for all of your dry goods and get your consumables and chemicals and whatever else you might be buying from there without it going into your food cost in your accounting system, as well as obviously in your food cost report. You'll have two percentages there, food cost and food including non-food related items food cost. So we do separate that out there if you are buying consumables through the system. Locked in price. You can lock in an entire supplier, or you can lock in one of the items on that supplier. So let's just say that you've only got this one item negotiated with this supplier. So your cheddar is always going to be $23.51 until you've negotiated that price increase. What this means is that we will monitor that price for you. So instead of just showing you any market variations, it will actually make sure that you're never charged any more than that and generate a credit note for the difference if you ever are. Now, if you're going to use this, please use our price update so that you can update those pricing on the schedule that you've agreed with your supplier, because the last thing you want to do is have a scheduled price update and the system keeps trying to generate a credit note for you. It's just going to make life hard instead of easier. So that's what the stock maintenance looks like and all the information that we save in there. So now let's look at what that stock gets used for. So as mentioned, categories go into your stock take. So when you go new, if you don't have a template and you're not going to filter, it's going to bring up every single item in your system. So you've got your categories here. So you can go through and click on that category and count all of your fruit and veg. Now, just like with your costing, if you've got an amount in there with these bean sprouts, you get the ability to either count it by one punnet, or if you know you have exactly 34 grams left, it will work out the amount of the punnet for you. So really good to have the inner measurements of that there, as opposed to one each, which means you can only do one punnet. We don't know how much is in that punnet. So if you did have less, you're going to have to try and guess, oh, I think that's roughly 1.5 of a punnet that I have left, because obviously we can't do anything with a metric measurement that we do not have. Placing orders. So when you go through and you hit new, you select your supplier, you want the date that you want it delivered, you're going through and hitting add, comes up with all the information here, selecting whatever you need. Again, here is what the supplier sees. So box each kilo. It's telling you here that this is a 10 kilogram box, just so you know, but all they see here is one each. So that is reading that it's an individual apple and you want 3 individual Golden Delicious apples. Now, if you did want a box, your supplier is probably going to send you 3 individual delicious apples, which is sometimes obviously not what you want. Now, we do try and make this easy to fix, because if you are in here and you think, my goodness, I don't want to order that as one each, you can change the amount, unit, and packaging type, whatever you need to do straight from here, and then just make sure you hit save when you're done, and then you can continue placing your order. So obviously when you do a bulk import, not everything's going to be perfect. Anytime you notice in your stock that something's wrong, you will be able to edit that stock, so long as you have the user authority to do so. And the most important thing is your recipes. So you want to make sure that your stock is as perfect as possible when it comes to writing your recipes. And you also want to make sure that you have all the stock that you need in your recipes. Otherwise, it gets very difficult to cost these out. So as you can see here, we've got eggs. We've got them as 144 each in a box for $55. For having 12 each, that's costing us, just over $4.50 for those eggs. Some of these things have a yield, so we're wasting some of the mineral water, which means we actually have to buy more than the 4,000 mils that we need in order to get the correct amount, which is why the price is pretty much the same price for a 6,000 mil unit as the 4,000 mils is, because we've got a 33% wastage on that particular item there. Now, a kilos for the strawberry dipping tray is exactly what we want in this particular situation, but let's go with the strawberries here. Let's say we want to add 30 grams. So we type 30, we change this from each to grams. Suddenly we've got $90 worth of strawberries in here. Now that's obviously not what we were aiming for when we were making this recipe. We wanted exactly 30 grams. So bear with me 2 seconds. I've just completely lost my screen, which is always good fun. So the little piece of paper on the end, when I eventually get my screen back up, I do apologize. I love doing things live. Things never work exactly the way you want them to. So here, this little piece of paper will give you a link to that particular item. It will search for the description you've got in the system. So if there is something wrong, you can go through and change that. Don't jump in and out of your stock section. Use that little piece of paper. Same thing if it's the wrong product. You can always click here, choose a different strawberry if you do have more than one option, and replace that item in here as well. That's pretty much the last step of doing your stock into the system. And I hope it's answered some of your questions that you might have around why some of these columns are here, what they all do, what repercussions it is for not entering your stock. Obviously, the better your stock lists are getting started, the better it's going to be using the program from day one. But we know that not everyone can obviously get it perfect the first time. Either they don't have time or they don't have that information. It's not always the chef setting up these stock lists. So everything is adjustable within the program. If anything doesn't make sense to you, as always, please feel free to contact us either on support@cookingthebooks.com.au or phone through on 1300 911 282. Comment down below or on any of our social media. We're always waiting to hear from you. So please let us know what your problems are. If you come across a nasty stock item that you're not quite sure what to do with, give us that exact example and we can definitely help you out there. But other than that, I think that covers most of what goes into the setting up of stock. And I look forward to speaking to you guys next time. Thanks, guys.